Hi, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. Today's episode is going to be about Discovery Season 1, Episode 8, which is a two-part TV episode, but this is only the first half. But weirdly enough, it's also the first part of this discussion. This episode was really interesting. There are some really interesting, good narrative elements that I want to discuss. And then there are some slightly questionable decisions that the show made that I want to discuss and maybe perhaps suggest a couple of ways that you could do the same thing to achieve the same effect, but do it in a way that didn't create problems for me. Um, so if that's of interest, what I'm going to do is this episode is going to be about the battle at the very, very start of the episode. The next video I do is going to be about the Klingons and about Stamets and Tilly. And then the last episode is actually going to be about the planet, the Michael Burnham, Saru, and Tyler storyline. And that's because basically there's a lot going on in the battle. The Stamets and Tilly thing is actually quite a small point, but the Klingon element, there are two different plot threads there I want to talk about, which is L'Rell and the Admiral, as well as L'Rell and the General. So there's two different things going on there. And then with the planet, there's a whole conversation about the mission, about Saru, about the relationships, about what's going on. So it's a lot in one episode. This is a really rich episode to look at. I strongly suggest that you have a look at this episode, even if you don't like the TV show, because this one is interesting. Is it good? That's a decision you'll have to make. But for me, at least it was interesting. So I'm going to have to refer to notes on this because this is a little complicated to keep all in my head. So to run through what happens in the battle sequence, the show starts with a distress call from the US Gagarin. The Discovery jumps in. The Gagarin is under attack from a number of different Klingon vessels, which are cloaking and decloaking in and out. The Discovery tries to protect the Gagarin. Even more ships come in. The Gagarin is destroyed. Discovery has to jump away. Lorca then has to debrief the Federation about what's happened. And it is an absolutely fascinating sequence. Number one, the things that I liked. So we get the names of the command crew. We get what they are doing, a bit of their job. So we have Detmer is definitely the pilot. I now remember Detmer is the pilot, and she's the one with the weird sort of eyebrow thing. And then we have Sokko. Oh, I can never say her name, and it's really embarrassing. Washington, and she scans things. That's all I know about her at this point. I don't know what that job is, but both times she's been scanning stuff, and that's all I know. Then we have Reese, who is targeting things and shooting weapons at them. So I'm assuming he's some sort of tactical officer. But at least they all have at least one line of dialogue. They get a little tiny bit of time on camera. So I'm getting better at knowing which one is which one. I'm starting to remember names and faces. Is it perfect? No. Would I have preferred a lot more? Yes. We'll talk about that in a minute. Big thing that I absolutely loved about this. Lorca, until this point, has been getting darker and darker and darker as a character. We saw he breaks Federation rules. He has a secret research lab full of outlawed weapons and dangerous weapons. He has recruited Burnham and Tyler against the wishes of the higher-ups. He's fine with Stamets breaking Federation law to inject himself with tardigrade DNA, all because he wants the win, all because he wants to beat the Klingons. And he turns his back on an ex-lover who is also his military superior, who's been kidnapped by the Klingons because she threatened to take away his ship. He is dark. He's scary. But in this episode, He jumps the Discovery in to protect another Federation vessel. And he physically puts the Discovery, this ultimate weapon that are the cornerstone of the Federation's defense against the Klingons, in absolute jeopardy by putting it physically between photon torpedoes and their target, the Gagarin. He is willing to risk his ship to protect others. And that is heroism. That is caring for these things. So he's not a warmonger. He's not out just to kill Klingons. He appears absolutely genuine that he wants to protect the Federation. So he becomes a lot more complex, a lot more interesting. And it's because the show shows us this. They are not telling us, oh, Lorca is a hero or Lorca cares about this stuff. Through his actions on screen, we see him do it. And to me, that is so important. It's the show don't tell rule that everyone talks about. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. The biggest point, though, about the battle sequence and why I think it's a great sequence in a number of regards, and it all comes down to this point. The Discovery loses. They don't win. We as an audience expect the Discovery's going to jump in, they're going to fight off the Klingons, they're going to save the day, and them and the Gagarin might have to limp away together or whatever, escape together. But Discovery would win. They'd protect them. And they lost. The Gagarin gets destroyed, the Discovery is badly beaten up, and they have to run away. And suddenly there's jeopardy in the narrative universe. Discovery can lose. And up until now, we haven't really had a sense of that. We always get the sense, no, Discovery's going to win because it's called Star Trek Discovery. But the Discovery can lose. And I thought that sense of jeopardy was so important to this scene because it undercut my expectations as a viewer. And it then made me buy into the narrative more because I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't just an easy fix for them. And even more than that is the Klingons clearly have adapted their fighting techniques to take account of cloaking technology. And the Federation hasn't wrapped their head around that yet. Because Lorca doesn't understand what the Klingons are doing. He doesn't understand how they are attacking. Now, they figure out, they can't be cloaked and fire at the same time. But he hasn't figured out the strategies then that they would use, the tactics that they would use. This is a new technology. The Klingons have perfected its use. They're utilizing it as part of their attack. Discovery, on the other hand, has not integrated Discovery's strengths into what they do. Lorca has them jump into battle and then fight like a normal starship. So where the Klingons have adapted to the new technology, integrated it into their strategies, Discovery hasn't. And so the Federation is at a double weakness. The Discovery is at a double weakness here. They don't understand the Klingons' new tactics, and they don't understand their own capabilities. So that, I thought, this scene, really well done in those regards. And shortly after this, obviously, Lorca has a scene where he's debriefing with the Admiral from the Federation. Thought I'd mention this because he insolently just walks right through the Admiral's hologram. As I hate holograms in all of this, in a lot of these shows. Whoever wrote that scene and wrote that direction for the scene, perfect. Because Lorca just goes, this is my captain's ready room. You aren't actually here. And he just walks right through the display. And you can see the slightly disgruntled, surprised look on this Vulcan Federation Admiral. And I thought it was pitch perfect. And it uses holograms. It acknowledges holograms the way that I've been asking them to do all the way through. So I had to mention that I like that as well. But what am I going to complain about then? I've said really positive things about this, and I genuinely mean them. But one of the issues here has to do with the pacing and tone of the scene. We have lots of very short shots, a couple of seconds focused on Lorca, a couple of seconds focused here, a couple of seconds showing the CGI battle, a couple of seconds showing that officer, a couple of seconds back to the whole of the command crew. It's lots of very fast editing to give you this sense of chaos, this sense of a frenetic, chaotic battle that is happening. Split-second decisions have to be made. And you go, great. It's almost like that sense of aerial combat, dogfighting, where everything is a split second away from disaster. And that's what you get from the editing in this sequence. Unfortunately, that is slightly at odds with Lorca giving an order and then his officer looking back at him to say, aye, sir, then looking back at their console to then execute the order. And you go, you've just wasted 2 seconds in looking back to answer him and then looking at your console again and finding your place and then starting to execute the order. You've wasted 2 seconds. And the fact that every officer does this, the fact that Reese, when he's trying to target, is looking at one computer, then turns, walks to a different station and tries to use that one. That isn't frenetic split-second decision making. That's the strategic sense of having a big carrier group where you have these ships moving and it's, yes, we're moving into this position. Are you going to do that? Yes, I am. And having the time, even if it's only a couple of seconds each time, to relay, yes, I understood that order. We're going to do this. We're now going to do that. It's about big things moving slowly. Well, you can't really do both. Well, you can do both. It's very difficult and you have to be very, very careful. But what we have here is they're kind of both mixed together. It's as if, yes, these are big, huge ships in space. And when we see the CGI, although they're moving so quickly, but when we see the CGI, the Klingons are actually gliding quite slowly. And when Reese says, I can't get a target on them, you're like, dude, I'm looking at the screen and I can see it's just going forward like this quite so. You could use a laser pen and track that. It's not that hard. So there's real difficulty here in what we're being shown, how we're being shown it, and how that is sort of establishes the tone of the scene. It doesn't quite gel. Second thing, I get that it's meant to be kind of chaotic, but I honestly have no idea how many birds of prey or other Klingon ships were out there. I don't even know the difference between the cruisers and the destroyer. I have no sense of what all those different ships were and how many there were. Because they kept jumping between close-ups of this and close-ups of that I never got a sense of how the battle was outlined and where everyone was and how it was being fought. There was too much on screen for me to kind of follow. And because each shot was so short, I never got a chance to take it all in. We were always on to the next thing and on to the next thing. The third thing about this is there seemed to be a lot of Klingon ships, at least 2 birds of prey and 2 cruisers and a destroyer. So that's 5 ships that were all cloaked and all jumped the Gagarin at the same time. How did it survive their initial alpha strike? If they had all decloaked at the same time, all fired at the same time, and all fired at the same shield or same part of the shield, they would have just blown that ship apart. Why has this fight gone on for as long as it had? And we keep saying, like, one bird of prey comes in and shoots a little bit, and then a different one comes in and shoots a little bit, and then that one comes in and shoots a little bit, and a different. None of it's coordinated. So it gives you this sense, and maybe this was absolutely deliberate, it gives you this sense of pack animals hunting a wounded animal prey to torture it, to take it down slowly, to let it bleed out. And you go, that doesn't sound like the Klingons. The Klingons are warriors. We're meant to think strategic. They're about battle. They're not about hunting. They're about battle. And battle is about winning. And their strategy here, to my mind at least, doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I will come back to this because there's an interesting point specifically about that. But then we get on to when I was talking about this, sometimes it was very fast seeming and chaotic, and sometimes it was like this slow, stately movement of these big ships. We have the Discovery say they're launching, they've launched 2 photon torpedoes at the Gagarin. So one ship is firing on another ship and has fired 2 photon torpedoes. Lorca then gives an order saying, move us between them. Detmer doesn't react right away. She takes a couple of seconds, but then starts to move Discovery, and Discovery goes up between them. They get hit by 1 photon torpedo. They all rock. They all recover. Then Lorca says, did we get hit, or did we get both, or did we get hit by 2? And someone answers them saying, I don't know. Then they all look at the screen and watch as the second photon torpedo then hits the Gagarin. My question here is, are these the slowest moving torpedoes in existence? Because you're telling me that one ship firing on another ship, and this ship that wasn't in that position already changes direction, accelerates, and gets in position to block one of them. Then they all have a couple of seconds to recover, ask a couple of questions, look around, make a cup of tea. And then they look at the screen and go, oh, the other one, oh, it's now exploded. And for me, that completely ruined the destruction of the Gagarin. Because I looked at that and went, why was that moving so slowly? If the Discovery can fly that fast to outrun a projectile to get in front of it that way, then why don't they all just fly away from photon torpedoes when they're fired at them? Because clearly they can move faster than them. It's a silly point, and I get what they were trying to show. But because of the structure of the battle, it just seemed so fake, so artificial. And I really didn't enjoy it. Then lastly, Lorca then, seeing the destruction of the Gagarin, there's no point for Discovery to be there anymore, says, black alert, jump. And it then cuts to this montage sequence of them getting the spore drive ready, Tilly putting in the coordinates, Stamets, getting his arms out like that, and then getting the ejections, and then Tilly saying to the captain, all right, we're all ready to go. And then Lorca saying, okay, jump now. That's over 16 seconds. And in the show, yeah, the Gagarin has just been destroyed. There's like 5 Klingon ships flying around that have been trying to shoot at Discovery. But for those 16 seconds, apparently the Klingons all went on a smoke break. And they're like, well, we blew one up. Good job, guys. That one? No, absolutely fine. Don't need to worry about that one. No, it's okay. Don't shoot at them. Like, maybe we'll come back later. And I get it's meant to be this sequence to show how cool the spore drive is and what they do. But in terms of the narrative time of the episode, it makes no sense that suddenly all of the attacks stop to allow them to do that. So that kind of annoyed me. And I suppose ultimately you can sum all of this up by saying that the dramatic reactions and the character elements, the pacing and editing, and the CGI elements seem to be separate pieces that don't quite fit together, that lead to these bits that overlap and these bits that block out sections of the other bit and obscure. So instead of it forming a complete, coherent pattern, they're all jumbled up with jagged edges. There is one last, absolutely last point on this. And the reason I left it at the very, very end is that it goes beyond Discovery. It's science fiction shows in general showing space battles. Do you ever notice in science fiction when two ships meet, they face each other like this? Have you ever wondered why they do that? Because it's not like they're looking at the windows at each other. Like that ship could be like that, and it would make no difference. It could be like that. That ship could be upside down. It makes no difference. They don't need to sit facing each other. And when they're fighting, why are they flying around like this? And part of it is, and I lay the blame solely on Star Wars actually, because a lot of the TIE fighter sequence and the X-Wing sequence, they borrowed from aerial dogfight footage. That's how they modeled a lot of those original sequences. And so a lot of us have grown up thinking of fights in space as being very much like dogfights in atmosphere. But space doesn't have an up and down. It doesn't have gravity. So why do we keep thinking in these sort of two-dimensional planes where there's an up and a down, and we think, oh, they are now going to go up, so we will follow them up. We think of it as them fighting in atmosphere, that there are these sort of planes running along and that the action is divided into these different planes, instead of thinking of it as three-dimensional with no gravity and conservation of momentum. Now, some shows have incorporated aspects of this with varying degrees of success and inclusivity. So, for instance, Babylon 5, the Star Furies used to flip around, still be flying, conservation of momentum, fire behind them, then flip around again. They did exactly the same thing in Battlestar Galactica with the Vipers. And obviously, The Expanse does some exquisite stuff with fairly realistic space mechanics. So, looking at the Klingon battle with the two Federation ships, it does suffer from that. Everyone seems to think that it's happening in atmosphere with gravity because they're all oriented basically the same way, and the Klingon ships fly in and then disappear, and then you see them, they're flying back and disappear. It's not atmosphere. Why do you constantly have these movements? But so we get to the stage of what would I do differently? Obviously, there's a lot that I liked and quite a lot that I didn't like. And I think one of the ways that you could actually do almost the entire sequence, have it work, but have it fit into a more seamless narrative is, instead of open with the Gagarin making the call, have it open on the bridge of the Discovery. And they're chatting away. Lorca's standing there talking to one of the officers when someone interrupts and goes, Lorca, Captain, there's an emergency broadcast. And it comes up on the screen and it's the Gagarin asking for help. Lorca immediately says, red alert, battle stations. And he radios down or communicates down to the Spore Bay. Get ready to jump. We're jumping into a battle situation. We need to be able to jump in and jump out at a moment's notice. And so Stamets drops what he's doing. He's running. He runs in. He's stripping it off. You have that whole sequence where he's getting himself into the thing and getting prepared. You have Tilly stopping what she's doing, running over, getting the coordinates. People are picking up the spores and they get everything ready. They do that entire spore sequence because it takes a number of seconds to show all the different moving parts. But we see them go from not having anything to do with the spore drive. They're sitting, doing their calculations, and suddenly they run in to get this all up and running. And you could even have Tilly say, when one of the guys picks up one canister of spores, say, no, get 3 because we might need to do emergency jumps. And so they pull out 2 more and they get those in. So it's already set up that the Discovery can jump more than once. So that gets that sequence in. You've taken care of it. We've got a bit of development. We then go back to the bridge. So as that's all going on, Lorca's now saying, Reese, when we go in there, I want all weapons hot. You see anything that's non-Federation and moving, you blow it out of the sky. I want your eyes locked on that. Yes, sir. What about blah, blah, blah? You're going to have him have a couple of seconds of, or a couple of lines of dialogue. Then he can say to Detmer, Detmer, we're going in to protect the Gagarin. You locate the Gagarin and you get us between blah, blah, blah. I want you to make sure that you're doing. Detmer's going, if we use defensive pattern Delta, sir. And he's like, excellent, Detmer, but keep in mind that blah, blah, blah. We might, again, couple of lines of dialogue. Get her engaged, tell the audience, show the audience that she knows what she's doing. And it gives her that screen time. It gives the audience time to get it into our heads what she is, what she's capable of, what her role is. And the same with the other officers. Because you have these, while the spore drive is getting ready, you have a few seconds. Maybe even you take 30 seconds. And then we get the message comes up from engineering saying, Captain, the spore drive's ready. We have 3 jumps that we can do in quick succession. After that, we're going to have to refuel the blah, blah, blah. So Lorca now has tactical knowledge of what's going on. His officers are prepared. They can get their game faces on. We can see them go from being worried because they've just heard this broadcast from another Federation ship to now Lorca looking, getting that stern face on. Everyone's looking at the thing and he's jump. And it shoots into, they arrive in the battle. And now when Lorca is saying, when the things start coming in, you can have Reese and all the other officers staring at their instruments and yelling out information to Lorca. They shouldn't be looking at him. They should be staring at what's going on because the information is not on Lorca's face. It's on the consoles in front of them. And they should be giving him information and letting him snap out new decisions. So they could have a Washington shouting out, 3 new birds of prey have decloaked off the starboard bow. And Reese saying, I've deployed countermeasures. And we see like a spray of little tiny torpedoes fall out and sort of blast and there's shock waves. You can do things like that. Have your whole battle sequence. But what I would change, it's actually quite dramatically different, is that I would only have birds of prey attacking the Gagarin. And the birds of prey are attacking and then they're attacking Discovery and they're sort of picking away at them. And Discovery shields are holding. They're weakening, but they're holding. Gagarin shields have taken a beating, but they're holding. And we can have the crew saying, our shields are holding at about 27%. Gagarins are down to 16%, but they're holding, sir, because they've divided the fire out. And there's a sense of, oh, this is going to work. When suddenly, that's when the big ships arrive. The destroyer, the cruisers, they all arrive. And one of them targets the Gagarin, but the others very specifically target the Discovery. And the birds of prey suddenly peel round and everyone is gunning for the Discovery while the one big ship just takes out the Gagarin. And why do I suggest this? Because I want the big ship to just blow the Gagarin out of the sky and everyone just be really shocked. Like, where the hell did these things come from? And it's like, they're all targeting us. Where did these other ships come from? And Lorca has to jump out. So we lose the Gagarin. They lose the battle. And Lorca goes, it was a trap. It was a trap for us. Because he's been warned about this. This was exactly what Admiral Cornwall was talking about. You can't just go in somewhere because the Klingons know about you. They're trying to find you. They want to find the Discovery. And that's why they'd ambushed the Gagarin. They were ambushing ships to see if they could get Discovery to jump in. And you go, so there you have like the entire battle sequence. We get the spore drive montage. Excellent. We get the introduction of the officers. Excellent. We get a great battle going on that you can extend as long as you want because they can hold out. You're raising audience expectations. And then you dash them in a single moment by, again, destroying the Gagarin, but revealing that this was all a trick to get Discovery. That's why they weren't finishing off the Gagarin. That's why the battle lasted so long. It wasn't that the Federation were holding their own. The Klingons were letting them win. Lorca realizes the Klingons know what they're doing. They are a smart enemy. They know how to use their technology, and he better find a way to beat them now. And to my mind, you've done everything that the episode wanted to do, but you've done it in a way that adds to the narrative and doesn't need you to sort of forgive aspects of it. So I really think that's like I think it's a simple, straightforward way that they could have done this. That it wouldn't have required massive rewriting. It wouldn't have changed anything that they were doing. It would have delivered all the story beats that they wanted delivered, and it wouldn't have changed the what happens in the episode. It just, to me at least, gives a far more concrete sense of what's going on and adds depth to the narrative. Some people don't need that depth. Some people go, oh yeah, it was fine, but things were exploding and great. AP, why are you getting bent out of shape? And you go, well, why not have both? If it doesn't detract from the action, why not have story supporting the action? And if it's not going to ruin the action for everyone else, having the story in place means people like me actually enjoy it. But anyway, I'll carry on with this in the next video because we need to talk about the Klingons and we need to talk about Planet Spotify. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.